Good morning, everyone. We are going to get started here. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being patient with us for a few moments. I am Dr. Erica Sutherland, Director of Marketing and Communications for the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, and I am here to welcome you to the 2019 Annual Legislative Conference. This is our opening press conference, and today you will hear brief remarks from our new President and CEO, Mr. David A. Hinson, and our honorary co-chairs, Congresswoman Frederica Wilson and Congressman GK Butterfield. And we are expecting an arrival from our CBCF board chair, Congressman Cedric Richmond. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm delighted to join a group of exceptional leaders. Congressional Black Caucus Foundation Board Chair Representative Cedric Richmond, who is on his way, and outstanding Annual Legislative Conference co-chairs Representative Frederica Wilson and Representative GK Butterfield. Welcome to ALC 2019. Before I get started, I want to give a brief moment of recognition on this September 11th to those Americans who lost their lives and the families who lost loved ones on this day here in Washington, D.C., and in New York City, and in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, a mere 18 years ago. I also want to join the many voices who are focused on the plight of our brothers and sisters in the Bahamas, who have lost over 50 of their citizens to the devastation of Hurricane Dorian. Throughout ALC 2019, you will hear much about the significance of this moment in history. Our conference theme, 400 Years, Our Legacy and Our Possibilities, reflects on the incredible journey that African Americans have traveled in this country since the first Africans landed on these shores in 1619. Our travel has been a journey of unspeakable pain and immeasurable achievement. We have gone from being the free labor that undergirded the U.S. economy to social, political, and economic influencers, not just in the United States, but around the world. The 55 members of the Congressional Black Caucus are a testament to just how far we have come. And I want to add that this is the largest group of black representatives in the history of our nation. But ALC 2019 is very much about bringing people together, young and seasoned, scholarly, and those who have graduated from the School of Hard Knocks from every region of our nation to engage, to learn, and to develop solutions around the many pressing issues that challenge the black community. Black women in leadership, wealth building, health and wellness, social justice, foreign policy, the plight of African American boys and men, the impact of climate change, and the future of the black community are just a few of the topics that we will consider this week. Every member of the Congressional Black Caucus is engaged in a valuable activity. Some are leading interesting sessions on topics such as the U.S. Census and voting, while others are giving voice to the history of our people. For example, Representative Terry Sewell is hosting a wonderful play called Four Little Girls about the 4 young girls who lost their lives in the Birmingham bombing in 1963. I encourage all of you to set specific intentions around the relationships, information, and insights you will acquire this week. And I encourage you to stay engaged when you return home to your families and your communities. ALC 2019 is about change and preparation for a brighter future. Thank you so much for coming, and I hope you enjoy the conference.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Let me begin by thanking our President, CBCF President, David Hinson, who has come on the job in the last couple of months and has just done a yeoman's job in taking control of this foundation and making this week a success. And thank you to his staff for your incredible work to make this week what it is. We are looking forward to one of the greatest ALC weeks in the history of the foundation. I came to the first CBC dinner 49 years ago. It was at the Sheraton Park Hotel way out on Calvert Street in Northwest. And the tickets were $100 for the dinner. And it was a grand event, but it was a social event. But down through the years, the ALC has evolved into what you see today. We are not just a group of people who get together for social purposes this week. We are about serious business. And the foundation understands that and makes sure that this week is a very informative week, but it will be concluded this weekend with a powerful prayer breakfast on Saturday morning with Yolanda Adams as our guest, and Howard John Wesley, the distinguished pastor of Alfred Street Baptist Church, as the preacher for the hour. Saturday evening will be the Phoenix Awards dinner. I encourage all of you who can to please attend all of these events this evening. But thank you, David, for your incredible work. And I know and you know that you cannot do this alone. If you did not have very capable staff working with you, this would not happen, and so thank you to all of you. Also, thanks to Cedric Richmond, Congressman Richmond, who is not here now. He is in a hearing, as Congresswoman Wilson and I are supposed to be in a hearing right now. We're going to be departing momentarily, but thank you publicly to Cedric for all the work that he does for all of us. And Karen Bass, the phenomenal chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. Karen is from California, and Karen works so very hard in taking our 55 members to a level that we have never seen before. And finally, to my co-chair, Congresswoman Frederica Wilson from Southern Florida, a woman who is not only a powerful voice in Florida, but a powerful voice here on Capitol Hill. And it's been a pleasure to work with Frederica over the last few months to make this week happen. Frederica has brought some new ideas into the conversation, and she is to be thanked and appreciated for that work. You know, when we went home for the August recess, I thought that everything was in the hands of David Hinson. But Sister Wilson continued to work with David and his staff to put some ideas on the table, and you will see the fruits of their labor as we go forward this week, and so thank you. The theme for this week is something that we struggled over a few months ago, and we finally distilled it and got it to a very short phrase, and it's called 400 Years, Our Legacy, Our Possibilities. When we talk about 400 years, and I'm not going to give a history lecture today, even though it's very tempting. Jim Clyburn is our resident historian in the caucus, but I'm probably in second place, and I would love to talk about what this 400 years means, but let me just see if I can give it to you in a few words. In 1619, the first Africans landed in the Commonwealth of Virginia. 12.5 million African citizens were transshipped across the Atlantic. Some 600,000, not all 12 million, some 600,000 of those 12 million ended up on southern plantations in the United States. Not all 12 million of those survived the voyage. Some 2 million did not make it. Why? Some jumped overboard. They could not take the humiliation. Others died from famine and disease, but some 10 million actually arrived in our country. And this was pre-Constitution. This was before the United States Constitution was enacted. But finally, the Constitution was finalized, and it was put into effect on March 4th of 1789. At that very moment, there were 700,000 slaves in the South, 700,000. But what goes unnoticed from time to time was that there was a provision in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 9, that protected the slave trade for at least 20 years. You may not know that. Written into the original Constitution was a provision that said that the transshipment of slaves from Africa could exist for at least another 20 years, and there could not be any constitutional amendment that would change that. And so that set the date of being January 1st of 20 years later, whatever that would be, 1808, was the effective date that Congress could even address the transatlantic shipment of slaves. And so finally, on January 1st of 1808, the transatlantic shipment of slaves ended. But the point that I want to make is that slavery did not end. Only the transatlantic trade ended in 1808. But starting in 1808, even though they could not bring in slaves from Africa, the number of slaves residing in the U.S. continued to increase, all the way to the point that when 1865 came, there were 4 million slaves living in the South. And that's when the 13th Amendment was added to the Constitution. On January 31st of 1865, the Congress of the United States, after the Civil War, or the Civil War was coming to an end, passed the 13th Amendment, and it was finally ratified after Lincoln's death on December 6th of 1865. So etch that in your memory. It was not the Emancipation Proclamation that particularly legally ended slavery in America. It was the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution that officially and legally ended slavery in America, December 6, 1865. And so we're going to not celebrate, that's not the right word, we're not even going to commemorate, we're going to observe the 400th anniversary of the first arrival of slaves in America. So welcome to this annual conference. I look forward to seeing many of you, and let's have some fun, but also let's have some serious conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Just to listen to Mr. GK Butterfield, Congressman, I just wish every child in America of African descent would hear his words and know the history of slavery. Let's give him another round of applause. That was absolutely phenomenal. And we do have some young people here from Tampa. I hope they're still in the room to hear that history that all of us are so still bothered by and affected by even after 400 years. Before I begin, I'm going to ask you to bow your heads for a moment in memory of the Bahamians whose lives Hurricane Dorian has literally blown away and sent a message of hope to the survivors. I am the first Bahamian American elected to Congress, and my ancestral home is Abaco, the target of the devastation. And I'm going to give you just a little snippet about Abaco. When the slaves were traveling to America, they had a shipwreck in an island that had no name. The shipwreck stayed there for a month waiting for another ship to rescue them. Everyone on that ship were college-trained engineers, doctors, and lawyers, but they had been enslaved and put on this ship. So as they waited for this month, they moved away from the ship onto the island, some of them. And when the rescue ship came, the captors had a conversation as to whether to look for them, to round them up and make them get on the ship. And they came to the conclusion it's best to leave them here because they're going to die anyway and be ravaged by wild animals. So the ship moved forward to the United States. Well, those were my relatives, and those are the people that were hardest hit by Hurricane Dorian, which is so amazing that this happened now. So I'm going to ask you to bow your heads for just a moment. Welcome, and it's a tremendous honor to serve as a co-chair of the CBCF's 29th Annual Legislative Conference. It has been my pleasure to work with Dr. Hinson in moving this event forward, and all of the members of the staff who have just been phenomenal. Thank you so much. I'm particularly excited about the theme, 400 Years, Our Legacy, Our Possibilities. The first part is a remembrance of our enslaved ancestors whose hard work and unimaginable agony made it possible for all of us to be here today. The second part, our possibilities, is a reminder that despite how much blacks in America have had to overcome and still must, the possibilities for greatness are endless. Tomorrow, we're going to host a town hall meeting on the social status of black men and boys. As you know, incidences of outright bias, gang and gun violence, inequities in education, employment, and just about every other aspect of American life on their ability to succeed or achieve even basic goals like getting a high school diploma and a job. Too often, they are treated like their own class of citizens. You will hear experts outline the challenges they face, but also offer some solutions, such as a bill, legislation, the Commission on the Social Status of Black Men and Boys Act that we have introduced in Congress to study these and other issues on a national level. At the town hall, you will also see a group of proud black boys in crisp white shirts and their signature red 5,000 Role Models of Excellence project ties. They are from Jacksonville, Florida, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and Miami-Dade County, Florida. They are the embodiment of what happens when we invest our time and our resources and our hearts in black boys. They are my boys, and their world is full of possibilities. Also, I'm excited, along with Dr. Skinner, for the prayer breakfast, where Yolanda Adams will sing, who is one of my favorite singers. If you've already have not gotten your ticket for the prayer breakfast, get one now. Saturday night, at the Phoenix Award dinner, I will introduce you to 3 members of the exonerated Central Park 5, Dr. Yusef Salim, Corey Wise, and Raymond Santano Jr. They are being honored for their courage and resilience after being in prison for years for a crime they knew they had not committed. When you see them, when the world sees them and the lives they've so remarkably rebuilt, we are once again reminded of our legacy and the power of faith and hope and, yes, possibilities. Thank you for being here. I hope to see you throughout the conference, and I want to see lots of news clips about this important event. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Congressman Wilson. I'm CJ Epps, Vice President of Marketing and Communications at CBCF. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces. At this portion of the press conference, we will take a couple of questions. Congresswoman has to get back to the Hill shortly, but we will entertain any questions that you have at this point. Do we have any? Okay.
Hi.
Please state your name.
My name is Shanera Ramsey. I was just wondering whether there are any discussions about potentially amending the 13th Amendment to remove Part B, which actually has enslaved more people than I'm thinking prior to the 13th Amendment in our prisons and jail system.
Yes, we have a very exciting group of men who will be a part of the forum, and all of that is in the legislation, which will be handed out at the town hall tomorrow.
And sir, please state your name.
Yeah, I'm Mark Rubinberg from Press Associates, not to be confused with Associated Press. For Congresswoman Wilson, we're coming up on the third debate tomorrow, Thursday night in Houston. From what you've seen and heard from the first two, have issues addressing African Americans been adequately addressed by the candidates debating so far?
You know, as an African American, I'm never satisfied with addressing our issues because we have so many. We are so disproportionately affected in every area: healthcare, education, criminal justice, wealth disparities, home ownership. All of these issues affect African Americans so much more than any other group. And I would love to hear the presidential candidates, all of them, the top tier, the middle tier, the bottom tier, discuss more issues for African American people, African American women who bear the brunt of the African American community on their shoulders every single day. Yes, the answer is yes.
Thank you for your question. Yes, sir.
How are you? Lindsey Dixon, Close Up Productions. For somebody like myself who's their first time here, what events is most important for young black men to be at this year?
Well, we have a potpourri of events. So, of course, I'm going to say the Commission on the Social Status of Black Men and Boys. There's another one. There's an Education Brain Trust that's going to address who will help him to be a man. And it sort of is the same way. I think that the play that we're doing on the Little Rock, I'm sorry, not the Little Rock, the children from Selma who were killed. We also have a great town hall on 400 years. That's tomorrow morning. And I think you should be there because what Representative Butterfield gave you was just a little bit of the history. But tomorrow morning you will learn more of the history of African Americans in the United States since the first Africans set foot here through slavery. You'll learn so much. So put all those in your agenda. I hope you're taping me. Okay.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And sir, in addition to that, we do have an emerging leaders track for young professionals like yourself. All are welcome, but it's targeted specifically to young professionals like yourself. In addition to the various items that are circulating throughout the convention center, if you go to cbcfinc.org/ALC, we have updates, we have a schedule at a glance, and we also have a mobile app for both Apple and Google. Are there any other questions?
Good evening, sir. Dr. Alan Ubia from Raleigh, North Carolina. Thank you very much for this job. I'm in Congressman Representative Butterfield's state. And my question is, President Obama passed the American Jobs Act. And in North Carolina, I served on the crowdfunding committee for Lane Marshall for about 2 years. And what we're not seeing when we look at taxation without representation, we're not seeing those types of opportunities being promoted by our political architects. So what can we do to promote more economic sufficiency in our communities, in retrospect, looking at the Tax Cut and Jobs Act?
One of the main objectives of the Congressional Black Caucus is jobs. And if you will remember, I had President Obama's Jobs Act in the Congress and got the parts of it through Congress by separating it in little parts for our President Barack Obama. But I want to say this to all of you to help you understand what happens when you vote. And you have to vote. You must vote. We control the the floor, the House of Representatives. We have passed many, many pieces of legislation that affect African Americans, immigrants, children, jobs, every criminal justice, guns, everything that you can imagine. And they go to the U.S. Senate to die. So we will have the opportunity to elect new senators to change the paradigm shift so that when the House of Representatives works real hard to shift bills to the Senate, they will pass and they will be signed by the President of the United States. So what needs to happen when you leave this wonderful conference, this week-long conference, is be motivated to go back, each and every one of you, to get every single solitary African American in this nation, those in wheelchairs, those in jobs, waiting in jails, waiting to be sentenced, can't even vote. Make sure that in nursing homes, every breathing African American to vote so that we can change this legislative body that we call Congress.
Yeah, I would second that. I would only add that when you think about economic empowerment, you're really talking about two factors. One is the institutional or environmental factor. The other one is the individual factor, the personal decisions that we make as African Americans in terms of our spending. And every day, when we wake up, when we put our clothes on, when we leave home, we are spending capital and we're making decisions on how we deploy capital. So I would say, in answer to your question, that the structural component, which Representative Wilson talked about, the CBC is taking and has continued to take actions to support the reduction of institutional structures that limit the ability to generate capital and achieve financial independence. But none of that works if the individuals here and around the country don't make individual decisions, one of which is to vote. That's an individual affirmation to achieve greater economic empowerment. The other one is to be counted in the census. Representative Karen Bass and Representative Horsford are really focusing on ensuring that every African American in this country is counted in the census. For example, in the state of Georgia, being counted means that you're literally adding around $3,000 to your pocket per person, because money flows according to the census allocation. So the individual decision, how you spend your money every day, who you spend it with, do you support African American owned businesses? How you allocate your capital, do you save? And how you allocate your time, are you being counted and are you voting? Those are the key decisions that have so much to do with achieving financial independence.
Thank you very much. We can accept one more question. Congressman Wilson has to head back to the Hill. Yes, sir. One more question. Yes, ma'am. It's the microphone.
Yeah, that question was too easy, so she gets to have another one. So, yeah, I've really been inspired by what I've heard you say in terms of how we actually get things done. And what I want to understand is, how do you get more dialogue and understanding for the everyday person to understand how the Congress and Senate actually work? Because I hear everybody talking about the President of the United States, and we have 20 people running. But at the end of the day, the President really doesn't get anything done without the Senate. And so I'm just really curious about, how do you get education down to the ground level for people to understand how things actually get done so that people understand that the vote really matters and where it matters?
personally, I think it comes from the activists that are in your communities. Before I was elected to anything, I was an activist. I was a school principal, and they built a composting plant across the street from my school, and I told them, don't build this composting plant across the street from my school, and they built it anyway. And I shut it down. $29 million composting plant they called AgriPost. I wasn't elected to anything. And then they began to bring Haitian refugees from Haiti and putting them in prison. Women in prison in a place called Chrome. And I said, you can't just do this. And so I came to Washington and met with our U.S. Senator and got him involved. He didn't even know this was going and took him back to Miami and made him get them to release those women from Chrome. And these are women who I still know today. So as activists, we have, in my community, I have a group of activists who follow me from event to event. So I have trained them how to advocate for our district, how to advocate for African American people, how to advocate for children, for seniors, and we keep the commission chambers filled, we keep the school board chambers filled, all of the mayoral chambers filled, and you advocate. And then when you're not clear about how that whole process goes, you set up an appointment and you come and you meet with your member of Congress. You meet with your member of Congress. You don't have to come all the way to Washington. You can meet with your member of Congress in the district office. I'm always meeting with activists and with people, and especially as Dr. Hinson said about the census, that's something new that we've begun to meet about. And we are turning our congressional offices into census assistance centers because the census is going to be online. Did you hear what I said? The census is going to be online. So we're going to need all of our activists' help. And thank you for being an activist. And I have to leave.
Thank you, Congresswoman Wilson. If there's nothing further, this adjourns our press conference. Thank you all for attending, and we look forward to seeing you throughout the week.